every group, I'm not just speaking about ethnic or religious group, but even regional groups can have very different meanings of what peace and justice means. We really need to think about ways how different communities with different dynamics of power and identity see peace, and sustainable peace only possible when we address all these differences in meanings, different variations in the way how people see it, see peace and justice.
I think that the idea of creating networks is about as patriotic and as American a tradition as you can think of, right? It's really extraordinary. It goes back to Tocqueville. It's the beating heart of America in so many ways. Nothing like that exists in the European context. When people stand up and they start forming their organizations, it sounds like I'm being romanticizing this, but it's true. It's deeply American, if I may say so.
It's not just the fear of institutions and responding. It's not just the students fearing what might happen if they share of themselves, right? If they expose their identities that some people feel like they have to hold really close, if not disguise at this point, given how people might respond. It is also, I would even say, like my fellow faculty members who don't necessarily have experience engaging around conflict, who don't want to touch this for fear of all kinds of potential repercussions, in the moment and maybe, globally, given social media.
Do you know what's the difference between danger and a threat? It's dangerous to walk on a wet floor. Threat is an intention. And this is what we attributed to the other group which drives the polarization and conflict. And if we are not dealing with the meaning of safe spaces, before you plan any contact between across political divide, you need to actually ask people, what does it mean for you to feel safe? What's the meaning of safe space? How do you feel threat? What threats you anticipate from other group? And design of the process of dialogue, of engagement should include these meanings.
Polarization is fundamentally an emotional experience where rage becomes a very common sense of self-powerment, which of course becomes a weapon. And this is obvious with right-wing extremists. It's also prevalent with social progressives who are extremists. Social progressives exhibit very clear signs of rage, which becomes somewhat self-satisfying. So when we are enraged by the evils of the other, this becomes both personal, because it's my rage. Nobody can question the validity of my rage. I own it. No one can challenge that. But it's also our rage. So the rage becomes a unifying force within the extremists. And I see this as very common even for groups that are not extremists. That is, groups that are, politically active, who are not violent, and so on.
It's not just a perception that people act, more egregiously online. They don't feel accountable, and they're less ethical. And these are people who would never, ever want to be characterized as bullies face-to-face and in the real world, but what they're doing when they're trolling is truly bullying. So all of these things, I think, inhibit students from wanting to talk. Why should we expect, if A, we don't necessarily have a hospitable environment for people with different opinions, and B, we also don't necessarily give enough skill that can be put into practice, and then give guidance along the way. It's a very high touch, and so maybe unrealistic for universities, but I really truly feel like higher ed has a big responsibility in helping to combat polarization.
In our daily lives, from the moment we get up now, and I was talking to my students last night about this, to the moment we go to bed, we don't have any interactions with other people that let us experience their humanity. And what has replaced the experience of getting what I call the humanity fix multiple times in a day is the opposite. It's the media and the tribalization of the media. People are only experiencing things in a tribal context and not on a human level. Students are craving these experiences because when you're in environments in which you are required to conform, you're actually very lonely.
We're limiting ourselves and the potential for transformation by the language that we use when we're talking about the conflicts, even as we're talking about things like victims and victimizers and how people put people into boxes.
I would like to see more conservative scholars engage. I believe that this is building trust across and understanding perspective and understanding these safe spaces which we can discuss the issues. I also believe in building very deep trust within us because we're academics, we have our own spaces. These panels, thank you, these conversations is unbelievable, come from different perspectives, but we all coming into this idea. But again, I believe more conservative scholars should be involved.